Okay, now it's recording. It's recording now, I can see.
The thing that excited me about the study from the very outset was the concept that one could use isomorphism to go from the hard science to the soft science. I'm used to using isomorphism in the work that I've done among the hard sciences, to go from something physics to something biological, to go to something in perhaps chemical, it's done all the time, and the idea of going from physics to economics became very exciting to me.
What convinced you that the whole idea was plausible? Because you seem to click into it without scratching your head. You kind of got it, whereas most people would be challenged or threatened by it.
I think it's because I've been interested in entropy and what entropy meant in terms of daily life for a long time.
Why?
I think it goes back to my grandmother.
Yeah.
My grandmother, a Jewish grandmother who did not believe in God, in fact, was in fact an atheist, not just an agnostic. And I had had many discussions centered about why, in fact, she did not believe in God. It was very interesting to me to ask that question of her as a young person. I think I was first aware of that issue in some detail with her around age 12, maybe a little earlier, but approximately age 12. And I asked her why she did not believe in God. And her response was, if there were a God, he would not have allowed the things to have happened that I saw with my own eyes. And she didn't elaborate at the time, but about 4 or 5 years later she did elaborate, and they were some amazing things that she had experienced and would give anyone pause regarding the concept of God.
Was this in America, or was she still in Europe, or what?
She was in Russia, actually Ukraine. And she was describing events surrounding one of the huge pogroms that had occurred in the 1903 to 1905 time frame that she was witness to. And I accepted that as being a legitimate concern in general, and also I understood what she meant by it. I didn't necessarily dismiss the idea of God in my own mind, however, at that time. But I kept referring to that in my mind in terms of our discussions that we had that were quite involved.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point I just asked her flat out, "All right, Mama," we called her Mama, "All right, Mama, if you don't believe in God, what is it you do believe in?" And she said, "I believe in oxygen. Without it, you die." Now, I later found out that she told similar stories to my brother, except I think she replaced oxygen with the sun or something of that nature. That, in some ways, was the trigger for me to go on a search of the prime mover, because in fact in college I took Comparative Religions of the World from Houston Smith, and became very interested in religions in general, and especially in the contradictory elements of Eastern versus Western religions. And in synthesizing this, I don't remember the exact day it occurred, but I do remember when I first understood at the basic level the idea of entropy and the inevitability of its increase in a system that in some sense in my mind, I think I replaced the concept of a God with the concept of entropy.
I can imagine replacing the idea of Satan with the idea of entropy. But how could you replace God? Since God has a plan and seems to be creative, and with humans evolving towards spirituality and everything, but increasing entropy it describes the destruction of everything. So how could that be a God?
I think I, in some sense, early on accepted at least the Jewish version of a God as being the sum of all. So the concept that whatever that bad and good combination is resided in the Supreme Being. There was no distinction, at least in my mind. I didn't get into the idea of Satan as a separate entity until I became more aware of that was in fact something that people discussed. I think mainly in a Christian way. I didn't feel it from the Jewish background I had.
But still, that kind of God doesn't sound like somebody you'd want to have over for dinner, let alone pray to.
Well, you've read the Old Testament. How often would you want that God to be invited to dinner? I mean, unless you could go toe-to-toe with that God, which I guess the Jews of the generation preceding me, their idea was to battle with God in terms of ideas. I mean, you've heard people say, the old Jewish guys say things like, "I'm mad on God," you know. I don't believe he and I are having a fight for many years. I've heard that one.
My favorite line is, God and I have an agreement. He leaves me alone and I leave him alone.
Yeah. I've heard that one also.
I think I made it up. I hope I made it.
Well, something of that nature.
Yeah. However, you know what Israel means? Do you know the word Israel?
Yes.
Yep. What?
Seeker?
It means wrestler with God.
Wrestler, yeah, right. Yeah.
So the idea of wrestling with God, meeting God as a covenant, toe-to-toe, face-to-face, that's a Jewish idea. Mm-hmm. Do you know what Islam means?
Supplicant?
Surrender to God.
Surrender, yeah.
Christianity is big on surrender also.
Yeah.
Every religion in the world is based on surrender, except for Judaism, which is more of a rule-driven religion based on everybody's playing by the same rules.
Mm-hmm. So interaction is encouraged.
Right.
Right.
Which is why everybody in the world hates the Jews.
Yeah.
Because we don't
accept certain rules.
Right. We don't believe what we see.
Off.